the end of the Ois Daled in the Rebbe's Maamer. We saw the basic punchline yesterday, but we'll see the end of it today. So we're at the top of page 197, and the Rebbe is quoting the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and we got just past the brackets, but we'll start from from the parentheses. We can start from the top line, because we'll just get a review of those last few words we saw. What's the difference between the upper worlds, which are metaphysical worlds, and ultimately Eilam Atzilus is a godly world, to this world? There's something very unique about this world, and this is ultimately the reason that this world is the purpose of creation. It's felt, our experience is that we exist by virtue of ourselves, even though we know that's not true, but that's still our experience. Other side of the parentheses, sixth line. And even though this is only in his feeling, that's our experience, meaning you and I also even know that that's not a true experience. Mikomokim, nevertheless, Hine ze gufa, this itself, sheyed nidme al kolpanim, that it appears at least to you and I, shemitziuse mi atzmise, that our existence is by virtue of ourselves. Literally, his existence is by virtue of his self. Zeu, why? How can you and I possibly have such an experience? Zeu mipnei sheshershe, because our source, and this is what's revealed in that experience, our source, Mia Atzmus, is from the essence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And what can be said about the essence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu? That his existence is by virtue of itself. So no other level of reality could possibly give us that experience, because no other level of reality has that experience, or does not experience existence by virtue of itself, or experiences its source in a higher level. That's what it's all about. It's all about revealing. I mean, that's why we call it or. Or is just a mushal, it's a parable for godly energy. So why do we call that level of godly energy or? Because the or is all about revealing its source. When you see physical or, you know it comes from somewhere. There's no such thing as a word that doesn't come from somewhere. There's only one state of reality that exists by virtue of itself, and we talked about that, and it's something we can't really understand, but actually, interestingly enough, we sort of can understand it because we experience it, even though our experience is false. And we appreciate the fact that we come from somewhere, even if when we relate to the fact that we come from someone, we'll just say it's our parents. We still come from somewhere. No such thing as just showing up. Okay. Kadosh Baruch Hu, the essence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, exists by virtue of itself. And so that's the level of godly reality that gives you and I that experience of existence by virtue of ourselves. Put in slightly different terms, what's the source of the dark? A level beyond light. What's light going to produce? More light. What can give an experience of lack of light? Something that's not light, which is really quite astounding. Yeah.
Can you expound upon what it means to really exist by virtue of ourselves?
We don't, so I can't expound on that. We experience that. When you wake up in the morning, what are you aware of? Yourself. Not in a bad way. Are you aware of the godly energy surging into you? No, probably not. If you are, you don't belong sitting here. You should be sitting here, not there.
So
I do not experience that. Just in case you had, that's not a prerequisite for sitting here. But I'll learn at your feet.
But it's by mode of concealment that we have this factor. But for example, in the higher worlds, because godliness is revealed, they don't have that.
Exactly.
And
Which is really quite astounding.
And same with like a tree in this world, they don't feel at all.
Well, I don't know. Your trees. Who knows what trees and animals? I mean, Adam Arishon went around to all the animals in the world and all the creatures in the world and got them all to bow down and accept God's sovereignty. So the Baal Shem Tov learned the language of the animals, so he could communicate with animals. I don't know how that works, right? What exactly does a lion experience? Well, I mean, excuse me, more powerfully than you and I would think a lion experiences existence by virtue of itself, simply the way you and I understand a lion, because he can't even imagine that there's anything else. You and I at least can come to the intellectual understanding that it's not true. The lion can't.
Wouldn't by that argument, a lion sort of be higher in like they have an extra ability?
The lower something descends, the higher its form. Who needs who to exist? Does the cow need you, or do you need the cow? You need the cow. You rely on the cow for your existence. Who needs who to exist? You or the cucumber? You need the cucumber. He doesn't need you. Oh, so that means on a certain level, his source is higher than your source, so that he gives you vitality. You don't give him vitality. You might plant him in the ground, but you don't give him vitality. You might water the ground also. The ground is giving him vitality. Wait and see what's giving the cucumber vitality. The ground is even lower than the cucumber. Right? So on a certain level, the higher something, the lower something, I mean, Chazal say this, the lower something is, the higher its source. Okay, fine, like a mirror image. The farther away you are, the farther you look. Okay. But there's no question that the purpose of creation is you and I doing Avodah in Olam Hazeh, not lions eating antelope. That's part of it. I mean, God put that there for whatever reason. But we can imagine the world without lions eating antelope a little easier than we can imagine the world, in terms of the world fulfilling any purpose. Then we can imagine the world without lions and antelope much more easily than we can imagine the world without human beings. It's not a lot would happen. One thing would no longer exist in the world if there were no human beings. It's called evil. The only creature that can do something against the will of God is that creature called a human. Lions can't, cheetahs can't, antelope can't, slugs can't, even mosquitoes. Even mosquitoes can't, as annoying as they are. Can't do anything against the will of God. They have a chip, and they do whatever the chip says they're supposed to do. God created one creature that can actually deny his existence and do evil. Take a bow. That's us. Right? That's why, this whole idea, how did God, how can a good God create evil? God didn't create evil. God created a creature that has the possibility of doing evil. So now he created the possibility of evil. There's no doubt about that. He never does it. Right? One of the answers that the Rebbe gave to people who used to ask questions about the events 80 years ago in Europe, I think he said this to Elie Wiesel, was that you have questions to where is God, why don't you ever ask where was man? And if your alternative to the existence of God is to be a humanist, so wow, now you're really in bad shape. Because look what they're about. Meaning, if that's your philosophical position. Doesn't mean that we understand things. We don't understand things. Well, another mashal, another parable the Rebbe uses in terms of understanding is how a child's in a laboratory of a very, very, very famous scientist, watching what the scientist does. He would have no clue what the scientist is doing. Okay, that we understand. But that child could grow up to be that scientist. So the difference between them isn't infinite. It's just quantitative. And the child could catch up to the scientist. But at this point, he doesn't understand anything. All the more so a human being relative to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We can never be him. We're not like that child. Because we could never reach the state that he is. You're invited to the table.
Want me to go to the table?
I don't. You can do whatever you want. I want you to do what you want.
Okay.
Tell my wife.
No problem. I'll send her a text.
Okay, don't talk to her. You're too religious for that, I can tell. That long gray beard. L'chaim, l'chaim. Even I stopped talking to her when my beard went white.
After what?
I said, when my beard went white, I said, I can't talk to a woman anymore, so I stopped talking to my wife. She's actually very happy
I
about the
roll
whole
it up.
thing.
I roll it up. It's like Basi, halftime.
Right. She's very happy. Okay. So it's quite an amazing thing, because it's on a certain level it seems dichotomous, but it's not. The lowest level is actually the place where the highest level is revealed. Why? It's not a place of revelation. It's a place of essential existence. That's this world. And so up there in the etzem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he says, I would like a dir b'tachtonim, that would be an interesting thing. I'd like a dwelling place in the lower realms. Right? So what does he do? He creates a place, this place. There's all sorts of other places in between, so to speak. But he creates this place, and in this place, there's an appreciation and a certain level of revelation by virtue of the nature of the place, of the existence of the notion of existence by virtue of itself. It's not true down here. But as the Rebbe says, the Rebbe's quoting the Mittler Rebbe, the very fact that you and I experience that means that the source of that experience is the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because that's the only level of reality that has such an experience, such that it could give it to us. Amazing. Godly light could not possibly do that. Nimsa Muvan, the Rebbe continues, again, quoting the Mittler Rebbe. Shakavana b'habriya. Let's pass this down to that gentleman there. I look in my book. Nimsa Muvan. Shakavana b'habriya v'ishtalshlus. Therefore, the intention of creation and the downward emanation of light through the four worlds. It's clearly not for the higher worlds. Why? Because what are they all about? Shinyonim Giluyim. Their reality is a reality of revelation, which is synonymous with Or. They're all about Or. They're all about godly revelation. So godly revelation is amazing. It's fantastic. What do Chazal say? We've quoted this Chazal many times. What do Chazal say? 4th chapter of Pirkei Avos, which is 2 weeks behind you and 4 weeks ahead of you. In that chapter, what do we say? Say that one moment of tshuva and maisim tevim is greater than all of the world to come. Okay, that's amazing. Meaning, and how's the Alter Rebbe explain that in Tanya? One moment of doing a mitzvah down here in Eilam Hazeh, right now, you and I, as we're sitting here doing a mitzvah called Talmud Torah in Eilam Hazeh, we are closer to God than we will be when we get to Gan Eden. We're not going to Gan Eden. Mashiach's coming. We're staying here forever. But all those people hanging out in Gan Eden. We're closer than they are to the Eibishter. Okay? Because they're only getting what's called Ziva Shechina, the radiance of the divine presence. We're getting it mamish. Not getting a radiance, we're getting the Eibishter himself. Okay, we do a mitzvah. The next line in the same Mishnah is Yofesh Achesh Al Kedes Ruach Be'elam Haba Mikol Chai Elam Hazeh. One moment of pleasure in the world to come is greater than all of the pleasure that can be understood in this world. And how do we understand that in Chassidus? Not that it's the moment of pleasure there is greater than a moment of pleasure here. No. All of the pleasure that could possibly be experienced in the 6,000 years of this world's history. It's 5,785, right? Okay. All of the pleasure, all of the intellectual pleasure, spiritual pleasure, physical pleasure, emotional pleasure, all that has ever been experienced in this world, all of that pleasure isn't equal to one moment of the pleasure that your neshama gets in Gan Eden. Whoa. Must be pretty good up there. Right? That's why Rabbi Meir davened for his Rebbe, Acher, who was told he wasn't going to get Eilam Haba. Rabbi Meir made a deal and said if he were in Gehenna for 1,000 years, could he get Olam Haba? And they said yes. So he went to Gehenna for 1,000 years. Chazal tell us that one moment in Gehenna, I'm sorry, this is the negative part of it, but what are you going to say? It's out there. One moment of Gehenna is like 70 years of the trials and pains of Job. So Gehenna's not so good. And it was worth 1,000 years of that to make it to Gan Eden. So he's there now, right? Because how 1,000 years works down there, up there, I don't know. But Rabbi Meir was 1,800 years ago, so his Rebbe's made it. So Gan Eden is an amazing place. Incredible revelation. But it's all just revelation. And as amazing as revelation is, it's not Atzmus, it's not the essence of God. It's just Ziv, it's just a radiance. Whereas what do we get down here? The real thing. That's why we don't want to go anywhere. Kima kavana, so what's the intention? The intention isn't those levels, those beautiful levels of revelation, as amazing as they are. Ki'im, rather, hakavana hu, the intention is the ultimate purpose of everything that exists, not just this world, every level of godly reality above the worlds, all the levels of Sevev, all the levels of Atzmus or Ein Sof, all the levels of reality. The ultimate purpose of all of those levels of reality is Olam Hazeh Tachton, is this little tiny world of ours. Shenid meloi, that it appears to us, she'ein gilui, that it's not a world of revelation, ki'im atzmi, but rather a world of essential being. Now really, that's not true, right? Really, it's taka, a function of light emanating downward and be clothed in kalim. Being clothed in vessels, it just happens to be that the vessel conceals the light. So since the vessel conceals the light so powerfully, what are you aware of? If you're aware of the essential existence of the thing itself as opposed to its source in godliness. What can you become aware of? What are you challenged to become aware of? The godly source of it. Then your life is a whole different life. But that's not self-understood, right? That's not something that is necessarily going to happen in someone's life. You have to be pretty fortunate to run into that. Either be born into it or run into it somewhere. Or else you can just spend your whole day and all your whole life in Olam Hazeh just, grinding up stuff. I mean, the guy was sitting in it for bringing on Gimel Tammuz, so obviously he was not completely disconnected from the good things. But I just do remember for bringing Gimel Tammuz in the yeshiva years and years and years and years ago, someone was sitting next to me. He was a visitor from South Africa, and I asked him, what do you do for a living? He's in ball bearings. He makes ball bearings. So it was Gimel Tammuz, 2 in the morning. I was just wondering, wow, hope he's not too into his ball bearings. You can imagine your whole life is making ball bearings. Now, making ball bearings for a living is fine. That's okay. There's no problem. You have to make a living, and that's God's fault. But can you imagine if your whole head would be into ball bearings? Like when you go home at night, you think about ball bearings, and when you wake up in the morning, you think about ball bearings. And I mean, what?
There's a lot to know about them.
I'm sure there must be a lot to know. I don't know. They're different sizes, and there must be a lot. There's a lot there. It's not like they're not useful. Someone has to make them, and Baruch Hashem he's doing, and he probably makes a living, he supports his family, but if his head's there, that would not be so good. If he's just, as the Pasuk says, if his hands and feet are there, fine. How do you make your living? With your hands. Okay, that doesn't mean you don't use your brain. Of course you use your brain. A carpenter uses his brain, a plumber uses his brain, an electrician uses his brain, and a lawyer uses his brain, and a physicist uses his brain. Everybody uses their brain. The difference between you and a carpenter is that he knows how to do things with the hammer and the wood that you don't know how to do, and that's up here. Okay, I can hold the hammer. Fine, but the question is, where's our head? Is our head in trying to figure out godliness, or is our head in trying to figure out how to make a living? Jewish education, we get yelled at a lot. Religious Jewish education. People are annoyed with us and take issue with the way we educate our children. Because what do we not do? We do not educate our children to make a living. We just don't. Why not? Because that's not what we think education is. We educate our children to be people who are sensitive to God and sensitive to other people. Does it always work? No, but that's the idea. That's the idea. That's a good idea. A living, they'll figure it out. Education isn't a trade school. Education is trying to become a fuller human being. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, for us, what does that mean? That means to become a Chassidus Yid, to become someone who's sensitive to elokus in their life. And that's what Jewish education is about. Making a living? Figure out how to make a living. I don't know, like so everybody seems to, most people figure it out. Better for worse. Doesn't mean you don't have to work hard at it. You have to work hard at it. It's not why you're here. It appears that it's not a state of godly light being clothed in kalim, which it is, but rather essential being, which it isn't. Right? But it seems that way. It seems to be that this world exists by virtue of itself. And it seems to be that, again, that's our experience of ourselves. And hopefully we can come to an appreciation of the fact that that's not true. That we exist by virtue of the fact that God continually gives us existence. Macro moment by macro moment. Through the work in this world, the service of God in this world. And what is that? Through those two levels of Avodah that the Friedrich Rebbe told us about in the first ois of the Maamer that we're learning, right? And the Rebbe is explaining that ois in this section of the Rebbe's first Maamer. Nisgala atzmus. So what do you and I reveal in this world? When we bring about a revelation of Elokus in this world, what level of godliness are we revealing? Light? No. Atzmus. Because what are we revealing? We're revealing the source of the world. What's the source of the world? Atzmus. How do you know Atzmus is the source of the world? Because you see very, very clearly that this world clearly must come from that place in godliness, because this world experiences something that no other state of reality experiences, which is existence by virtue of itself. And there's only one level of reality that truly does exist by virtue of itself, and that's not godly life. That's the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's Musa Yisborach. So when you and I do a mitzvah down here in Olam Hazeh, what are we revealing? Elokus. What? Not light. Atzmus. You know what? That's why Olam Haba is so much more pleasant than Olam Hazeh. Because what gives you more pleasure? Light or concealment? Light. So down here, you don't feel it like you feel it up there. But that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't qualitatively on a completely different level. The malachim in Eilam Abriya are so jealous of you that you can do a mitzvah. The malachim, they were upset that the Torah was being given to us. What the Eibishter basically explained to them, they can do mitzvahs. And when the Torah came down here and there were these explosions of beyond light, every time a Jew did a mitzvah, the malachim were going, whoa, what's that? All these atomic explosions of atzmus. The malachim said, whoa, what's going on down there? Oh, no, just a Jew putting on tefillin, nothing, don't worry. Yeah, but it is that the whole reality shook. Yeah, well, that's what it means for a Jew to put on tefillin. That's what you and I get to do down here. But what? We don't necessarily feel it. Some people are very into feeling it. Like they just have to feel it. But it's good if you feel it. That's good. Not that you shouldn't feel it. Right? But they're sort of convinced that they have to feel it. And if they don't feel it, something's wrong. Not necessarily. Right? Doesn't mean anything's wrong. If you're extremely dedicated to the purpose that God sent you to this world to accomplish, and you spend your days doing that, are you always going to be, reveling in the light of it all? No, not necessarily. But are you always going to be doing it? Hopefully. And that's what's real. Right? So I haven't heard it for years, but I remember in the old days there used to be a saying about Yerushalayim, that in Yerushalayim there's a lot of ore junkies. People who are hooked on ore. And they go to the kaisel and feel the ore and wave back and forth. And that's great. That's what they're feeling. That's great. It's fantastic. If a person's really feeling that spiritual upliftedness, that's great. But the real litmus test is what's the person doing an hour and a half later when they're not there swaying back and forth. Right? And there's nothing wrong with swaying back and forth. I'm not making fun of anybody who sways back and forth. But if my whole life is about getting that hit now and then, so it's basically about me getting a hit, right? What's it got to do with God? So that was the line, ore junkies, people hooked on ore. Don't be hooked on ore, be hooked on God. There's aspects of God that are ore. There's also aspects of God that are beyond ore. That's what we're learning here. And putting on tefillin, that's atzmus. And giving tzedakah, that's atzmus. And being honest in business, that's atzmus. The person who's honest in business is sitting there with his eyes rolled up in the top of his head, swaying back and forth. Oh, I'm honest in business. No, he's on the phone talking to a client. Right? But what's he not doing? He's not trying to figure out a way to cut ethical corners so that he can make a few more bucks on this business deal at the expense of that client. Why isn't he doing that? Because he believes in God. And he knows that God doesn't want him to do that. And the Abish will figure out if he's supposed to have that extra $10,000, whatever it is. So the Abish will figure out how he has the extra $10,000. I mean, he's not supposed to have it. He's not supposed to have it, and all the cutting of the ethical corners isn't going to help. And he might make the extra $10,000 in the business, but guess what? He'll crack up his car, and it'll be a $10,000 repair job, because the Abish gets you one way or the other. You get what you're supposed to get, right? You want to be a little cheap on tzedakah? The Abish will take it away another way. Give it to tzedakah. That's the best way to take your money and give it away, right? Otherwise, you'll be giving it away to the guy who's fixing your flat tire. The Abish is going to take it away one way or the other. That money is not yours, right? The Abish is very, very kind to us. He lets us keep between 80 and 90% of his money when he gives it to us. Okay. And there's ways of looking at reality that are different and godly, and it works. Changes our lives. Are we perfect? We're not perfect. We're nowhere near perfect. But is there more? Is there a greater illumination in things, greater godliness in things? Absolutely. How do we do it? Iskafin isafcha. Telling the Yetzer Hara to gay pfeifen and transforming physical reality into godly reality by using it in line with God's will, and transforming those subconscious aspects of ourselves that are not necessarily the way we would like them to be. Over time, we can also affect them to a certain degree. All of them? Well, when Mashiach comes, we'll all be tzaddikim. In the meantime, there's a little bit of us that might be a tzaddik, a little bit of us that might be a beinoni, and a little bit that might be something else. And that was, for that purpose, was the creation and the downward emanation of the worlds. That's what Elam Hazeh is all about. Elam Hazeh is all about you and I doing what we have to do in order to get past this illusion that we exist by virtue of ourselves. Not the illusion that we exist. We exist. How do we know we exist? Because God said, "Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'haaretz" in the Torah. The world's not an illusion. The world exists. It doesn't exist on an absolute level. It exists on a relative level. Okay, absolute existence, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has. And what's absolute existence? Well, we just saw it. It exists by virtue of itself. It doesn't require anything else to give it existence. Okay. So that applies only to one level of reality, and that's the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything else exists by virtue of the fact that there's a source that wants it to exist. Something giving it existence. Okay, even the highest levels of godly light are like that. And you and I are also like that. Okay. And when we're down, but we have this interesting experience. No other level of reality has this experience, that we seem to exist by virtue of ourselves. We could lose sight of the fact that we have a source. Right? Our challenge is to overcome that illusion. We do have a source. And to realize that we're put here for a purpose, to reveal that source. And that source is Atzmus. And that's why this world, that's what the Abraham wants from this world, the most powerful revelation of godliness that could possibly be. Can't happen in Eilam Atzilus. Why not? Or blinded by the light, so to speak. What are you blinded to? Atzmos. The light is so amazing. Like, why do I want anything else? Okay. That's our Rebbe's explanation of the end of the first chapter that we just finished in the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maamer. And what's the Rebbe explaining there? Even though interesting, he didn't use the words once in the explanation we saw. But that's the explanation of the idea that the Rebbe says at the end, Yisr na'or ba min ha'choshech, the advantage of the light that emerges from the dark. And what it means, according to what we just learned from our Rebbe's first Maamer, is there's a level that is beyond light that emerges from the dark. And what's that? Atzmos. Yisr na'or, it has an advantage over light. It's not the light of advantage, it's an advantage over light. What's that? Etzem, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's beyond light, beyond infinite. Light's infinite. Even though there's levels of godly light that are also on a certain level beyond it. Okay, let's read the Kitzur again, just to remind ourselves of what the Rebbe said in the first chapter, and we'll start the second chapter. Yeah, back to our original Maamer. Does everybody have a copy of the original Maamer? I made 2 more. How many are here? 2. There's 1. There we go. Yeah? Okay. Back to the Frierdiker Rebbe's Basi L'Gani.
I'm embarrassed to say I no longer have it.
I don't have another one. I can make another one for tomorrow, but you'll have to look on today.
You just handed them out.
I just gave 2
Oh,
up.
no.
I just gave it to him.
Are you sure? Yeah, positive.
I once heard about truck drivers in America. Truck drivers in America have to stay awake. They drive long hours on those roads, and American roads are great roads, which means they're boring. It's hard on a straight road to stay awake. If the road is turning and you have to really concentrate on the driving, it's easier to stay awake. American roads are so good. It's just, if you're driving one of those rigs from Illinois to Colorado, you're in a straight line for 1,500 miles. There's not a hill anywhere, nothing. You'll see the hills in Colorado in the distance as you're getting close. Okay. So I once heard an amazing thing. What do they do to stay awake at night? Now, obviously, they cannot do this in the winter in Minnesota. But what do they do to stay awake at night? They drive with their window open and hold a $50 bill in their hand, in their fingers. If you doze, what's going to happen? Now, if you doze, you're going to die. Evidently, that doesn't bother us, right? But the $50 in the hand, it does. Which is crazy, but okay, we all understand that makes sense. That's one of the tricks, which is really brilliant, right? You're holding that $50. You can't let go of that $50, right? Now you've all fallen asleep on a train or a bus or something, and your phone fell out of your hand. Okay, Baruch Hashem, you like your phone less than you like $50. That's good. You're probably in good shape if that's the case. That's what they do, evidently. So I always think I should pin $10 bill to every Maamer, and then no one will ever lose their Maamer because of the $10, unless they spend the $10. But that's why $10 is a good idea, not 50 shekels, because $10 it's sort of hard to spend around here. 50 shekels you could spend. If you need something for the cart in the supermarket, a quarter.
Oh.
Keep a quarter in your wallet. You can't spend it, and it'll always be there. The 5 shekels you keep in your wallet, that you spend, and then you go, I spent my 5 shekels. Darn it, I used that 5 shekels. You'll never spend the quarter, so just keep it a quarter, because the quarter works as well as the 5 shekels. And if it's a 10 shekel cart, which they've now come up with, a euro. €1 works perfectly, but you also can't spend. So you just keep those in your wallet, then you're in good shape. You'll never run out of, or in your car, wherever. They're a little tip, right? What was that name? The lady whose last name was Child, something.
Julia Child.
Julia Child. So there was a Julia Child's tip, or Emily Post, or something like that. Okay. V'hinei. The kitzer. Iker shchina b'tachteinim. We learned that the most powerful revelation of Elokus is in this world. Well, we learned that also very, very clearly from what we just learned from our Rebbe. Yavar de kavanas briyas eilemus. He explains that the purpose of the creation of the worlds, shiyeh dir b'tachteinim, that there should be a dwelling place in the lower realms. How is that brought about? Nasa yadeis kafir v'yisafcha. 2 levels of avodah that the Rebbe taught us about in the first chapter. Subduing the Yetzer Hara and transforming the Yetzer Hara. And transforming physicality b'chlal. Shemamshich ar haseviv, that drains down, or haseviv, shezeu b'chulam b'shava, that is in all the worlds equally. Interestingly enough, the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about it in terms of seviv. Our Rebbe immediately translated that into atzmus, the essence of God. Which is interesting. Because our Rebbe's whole Messias is about the revelation of atzmus. That's what the Rebbe talks about. The revelation of Atzmus in Chassidus happens in the 7th generation. Atzmus is talked about more in the Rebbe's Maamerim than, it's not that it's not talked about in other Maamerim, but the Rebbe's Maamerim, constantly. Where is it not mentioned B'chlal? Tanya. Now the Rebbe's talking about Soviv and Mamala. Doesn't ever talk about a higher level than that. Rabbi knows it's there. That's not what's talked about.
Atmos is
the essence of God.
Yes.
That 3rd level of reality, which is the only thing that has absolute existence.
So that's in the same category as we're saying. So like
No.
it's
Seviv is Or, revealed reality. Atzmus is the source of that Seviv. It's beyond that. I mean, to call it, the Rebbe Shab says don't call it a source because it's beyond being a source. But in terms of what it does, it is the source. It's the luminary. It's the luminary, not the Or. Right? And even the fact that Atzmus is a luminary is only so, you can't say this about Atzmus, but I mean, you can't say anything about it. But we have to say something. It's, so to speak, the function of Atzmus. What does it do? Okay, it shines. But that's already a decision, so to speak, in Atzmus to shine.
What's the difference between when we say Atmos or Etzem? It's just
Same.
the same.
Atzmut is
Just
essence, the same. V'hinei. 2nd chapter. Zois haisa avoda b'mishkan u'mikdash. The Rebbe is now going to explain that dealing with physicality and transforming physicality into holiness, well, that was brought about in the most powerful and revealed way in the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the desert, and the Mikdash, the base of Mikdash in Yerushalayim, which we're supposed to learn about these days, so we are, Baruch Hashem. And in this chapter, what's the Rebbe going to explain to us? The inner aspect of korbanos, sacrifices.
Can I make a quick clarification? The first one was the Rebbe retelling the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maamer, and then this is his.
What do you mean the first one?
The first Maamer that we learned.
No, we're back.
Oh.
We are now back in the previous Rebbe's Maamer. Today, the first thing we learned?
Yeah, today what we learned was from the Rebbe.
Right. Now we're going back to the previous Rebbe's Maamer.
Oh, this is the second chapter of
the second chapter of the previous Rebbe's Maamer. Right. The previous Rebbe's Maamer is 4 Maamerim, each of 5 chapters. We're going to learn the first Maamer of those 4. Right?
4 Maamer, all done in 5710.
5710, the Frierdiker Rebbe gave our Rebbe 4 Maamerim to give out to the Chassidim. 1 for Yud Shvat, which is the yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother, Rebbe Marash's Rebbetzin Rivka. 1 for Yud Gimel Shvat, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe's mother's yortzeit, Rebbetzin Stern Sarah. 1 for Purim, and 1 for Beis Nisan, the Frierdiker Rebbe's father's yortzeit, the Rebbe Rashab. He gave 4 Maamerim. Each Maamer had 5 chapters. Our Rebbe then said a Maamer every year on Yud Shvat, and for bringing on Yud Shvat, the Rebbe would say a Maamer, beginning with the words Basi L'Gani Achoisi Kala. The Rebbe would say the beginning of the Maamer, and then explain one of those 20 chapters. And over the next 20 years, the Rebbe said, he said a few more than 20 Maamerim, because sometimes if it fell on Shabbos, the Rebbe would say a Maamer on Shabbos, and then a Maamer on Motzei Shabbos or on Sunday night at a for bringing with a microphone. But so sometimes there's 2. But this book, Sefer Maamerim Basi L'Gani, how can a 20-chapter Maamer take this much room? It doesn't. This is 20 years of the Rebbe's Maamerim. So from Tafshin Yud Aleph, 1951, till Tafshin Lamed, 1970, the Rebbe said a Maamer every Farbrengen on Yud Shvat. The Rebbe would say a Maamer. The Maamer would begin with the words Basi L'Gani Achoisi Kala, and the Rebbe would explain one of the chapters, one of the 20 chapters, in order, one of the 20 chapters of the Frierdiker Rebbe's 20-chapter long, what's called Hemshech, 4 Maamerim in a row.
So we end up with 40 total.
What?
We end up with 40 total. 20 from the Frierdiker Rebbe.
No,
20.
20 chapters from the Frierdiker Rebbe,
Right.
20 Maamerim from our Rebbe. Those 20 chapters aren't Maamerim. There's 5 chapters in each Maamer, right? Then the Rebbe started again in Tafshin Lamed Aleph. So that's why this book has an Aleph on it, Basi L'Gani Aleph, because there's a base, right? There's volume 2 of Basi L'Gani Maamerim. What's volume 2? 1971 to 1988. Then the Rebbe stopped saying Maamerim, basically, after the passing of the Rebbetzin. Why? We don't know. We don't know these things. It is interesting, though this certainly wasn't the case relative to the Rebbe's general behavior, because the Rebbe was still, unbelievably, more active on a certain level. The Rebbe started for bringing every single Shabbos and showing up every day in Minyan, etc. When the original person with the Rebbe's name, the Tzemach Tzedek, when his wife, who also had our Rebbetzins name, when she passed away, the Tzemach Tzedek stopped saying Maamerim, stopped having Yechidus, stopped having anything to do with the Chassidim. And the Chassidim complained. They said, we can't live like this. And the Rebbe said, all my keiches are from her. That's what he said about his wife. He started up again, but that's what he said after the passing of his wife. He said, all my keich comes from her. Stop saying Maamerim for a while. Stop seeing Chassidim and Yechidus. Tzemach Tzedek. He did that. It didn't last that long. He started again, and Baruch Hashem, there's all sorts of Maamerim, etc. afterwards. But interesting enough, our Rebbe basically stopped saying Maamerim after the passing of the Rebbe. Few Maamerim, the Rebbe said, much shorter. 2 Maamerim in Tafshin Memtes that were, but not in Farbrengen. The Rebbe also stopped Farbrengen during the week. There were no major Farbrengens on major days anymore. The Rebbe would Farbrengen almost every Shabbos, but there were no Farbrengen. Yud Tes Kislev, there was no Farbrengen with the Rebbe. The Rebbe would say a Sicha after Maariv, Sicha in between Mincha and Maariv, from the front, standing at the Stender. You've seen videos of that. Farbrengen, the Rebbe sitting in Farbrengen, no more. After the Rebbetzin passed away, those Farbrengen stopped.
The concept of a Rebbe as a spiritual leader of community, rather than in other Orthodox, like modern or whatever the other, or Sameach, whatever you call that, lucky, traditional religious Judaism, not the same.
Don't call it mainstream.
Okay. So,
Lubavitch is mainstream.
Did that concept of the Rebbe start with the Baal Shem Tov, or where did it? Because it's a different type of relationship with the Rebbe than previously.
Exactly how it worked with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we're not sure.
Okay.
We're just not sure.
Okay.
But we certainly see how it worked with Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right.
Right? That the Eibishter decided, for whatever reason, and not that it doesn't have to be this way, but he definitely decided that basically everything he was going to do in terms of the world was going to happen through this person called Moshe Rabbeinu. The Eibishter doesn't need Moshe Rabbeinu to give us a Torah. He doesn't need Moshe Rabbeinu to split the Red Sea. He doesn't need Moshe Rabbeinu to take us out of Egypt. He doesn't need Moshe Rabbeinu for anything. But for whatever reason, the Eibishter made a decision that he wants this person called Moshe Rabbeinu to be his, I'm going to use a word that might make you nervous, but it shouldn't make you nervous, his intermediary in Olam Hazeh. An intermediary, not an intermediary that is in any way, shape, or form independent. But God has all sorts of intermediaries. God wants to give us light. What does he use? It's called the sun. Do you worship the sun? Don't be a dummy. The sun has no bechir chavshis. The sun is not doing what it's doing because it wants to or because it decided to. It's doing because the Eibishter created it, put a chip in there, and that chip is shine. And so that's what it does. But you and I couldn't live without the energy that we get from that sun. That's why a lot of people started to worship it, which is a terrible mistake. God says it over 50 times in the Torah. God tells us not to worship idols. There are over 50 negative commandments in the Torah about idol worship. So obviously, it's something that has to be taken very seriously. Because if it's not something that no one is going to think about, God's not going to tell us not to do it. Because it's that. Why bother? We're not going to do it anyway. It's irrelevant. It's not part of human reality. No, evidently idol worship is part of human reality. How? Well, simple fact that you probably say thank you to your waiter. If you don't, you should. Did he cook the food? No. Does he own the food? No. But he served you. So you should say thank you. So they figured, I'll do the same for the sun. I'll say thank you to the sun. What's the difference between the waiter and the sun? The waiter doesn't have to. He could spill it in your lap if he wants to. So you thank him for not spilling it in your lap. Okay, but the sun can't not. So the sun is just like the axe in the hand of the wood chopper. You don't thank the axe for building the building. The wood chopper built the building. The carpenter built the building. He couldn't do it without the wood, and he couldn't do it without his Stanley saw. But you don't thank the Stanley saw. You thank the carpenter because he's the one that did it. Okay, so we don't thank the sun. But there are intermediaries in the world. And one of those intermediaries is called Moshe Rabbeinu. It's what's called Memutza Mechaber, an intermediary that connects, as opposed to separates, connects. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Zohar tells us that there's an expression of Moshe in every single generation. Every generation has its own Moshe Rabbeinu. The Zohar. So, I'm not flying the flag. I'm just saying in the simplest way. Chassidim, no, seriously, because Chassidim don't have to defend the position of having a Rebbe. Someone who doesn't has to tell me how they understand that Zohar. I don't have to explain the Zohar. The Zohar is absolutely clear to us, right? That there's a Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation, and that's called the Rebbe. Which Rebbe? Okay, so the Ger Chassidim might say their Rebbe, and the Lubavitchers will say theirs, and the Bubavers will say theirs. Fine. Okay. Oh Shekein, Shalom. Though in our generation, interesting enough, I remember once having a conversation with a friend who was a Ger Chassid, and he said, look, my Rebbe is my Rebbe, but your Rebbe is the Rebbe of the Rebbes. This generation, it's pretty clear, no one is giving anybody mementos from the bub of a Rebbe. The President of the United States is not getting mementos from Jews from the bub of a Rebbe. Not that the bub of a Rebbe is not a holy Jew, he's a holy Jew. But where does he go? It's not Jewish. Where does he go? He goes to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Who does he get $1 from? When the Prime Minister of Israel meets him, what does he talk about? He talks about his relationship with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This generation is just ridiculously clear. It's like crazy what's going on, especially now. It's unbelievable what's going on now. Israeli television is talking about the Lubavitcher Rebbe all day long. During the war with Iran, talking about we can't not mention the centrality of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in this whole affair because Donald Trump went to the Rebbe before he got elected and that helped. And Bibi, we know, got a bracha from the Rebbe 40 years ago, and that bracha is being expressed right now. This is what they're talking about on Israeli television. What? No, you don't have to buy a television. Just have a phone and someone will send you the clip. And then you can wait. You don't have to waste a lot of time. You just see that clip. You go, wow, that was cool. It's crazy. Bibi Netanyahu goes to Donald Trump and gives him $1 from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Whoever heard of such a thing? What's going on? Okay, Baruch Hashem. The president of Argentina comes and he gives a gift to the Prime Minister of Israel. What's the gift? What did he give him? A painting of Bibi with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And Bibi evidently almost started to cry. That's what the president of Argentina gives the Prime Minister of Israel a present? Give him a chucharacha. I don't know. What do you give him? Something from Argentina? What isn't that what you do, right? You bring you bring a carpet that was really from Mexico, because in Argentina they don't do anything. But you bring it from Mexico, and you say, this is from Argentina. And they do a lot in Argentina. It used to be one of the richest countries in the world before they destroyed it. And he's like, this crazy guy is trying to put it back together. He seems to be doing a pretty good job. Okay. So what did that guy bring to the Prime Minister of Israel when he came? First Argentinian president to visit Argentina, right? Argentina, in the minds of the people in this room whose beards have changed color already, what does Argentina represent? What's the first thing you think about when you think of Argentina? Nazis. Who gave the Nazis a place to go to after the war? That's Argentina. I mean, that's what I think about. That's where did they find Eichmann? Argentina. Who helped them get there? The dope in the Vatican, right? He's the one that arranged it all. He was arranging getting the Nazis from Germany to Argentina. Yay. That's Argentina in the heads of most people my age, right? The place where all the Nazis went. Safe haven for Nazis. Hey, ugh, safe haven for Nazis, that's disgusting. Yeah. Now the president comes and gives a picture of Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's crazy. Okay. So in our generation, we see it in a very, it's hard not to see it. Okay. But in every generation, that's the way it works. Who was it in the generation of Rabbi Akiva? That's a pretty good question, because there was a lot of competition. There were so many unbelievably, incredibly holy people in that generation. It's just hard to, who was it? I don't know. So in certain generations, it might be hard to figure out, and in other generations, it might be easier. Certain people took the mantle of leadership very, very seriously. Right? In Russia, it was clear. Again, I'm not saying obviously we would say the whole world, okay, but in Russia, it was absolutely clear after the revolution who was the head of Russian Jewry. Well, the Rebbe, absolutely clear, is the one who took the responsibility for Russian Jewry onto his shoulders, basically personally, and saw to it that there was still Yiddishkeit in Russia. And we have all the documents now, which we didn't have. We didn't know. But where's the Rebbe getting the money? From the joint. So what was the Rebbe doing? Writing down every penny sent, because he had to account for every penny sent and spent. So he has lists and lists and lists of the schools and the names of the students and the names of the teachers, hundreds of schools all over Russia, being supported by one person. I mean, by the joint, but all the money's coming through the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe is organizing it all. The Russians realized that this guy's dangerous. Right? So they tried unsuccessfully to do away with him. So Chassidim take that Zohar seriously. The burden of proof, and it's not an argument. I'm just saying, if there's someone who says no, that isn't how it works. So then, what do you do with that Zohar? And we believe the Zohar. The Zohar is not the. So what do you do with that Zohar? I don't know. But for whatever reason, that seems to be the way God runs the world. He doesn't have to run the world that way. He can run the world any way he wants. But if you look in the Torah, you look in Tanakh, there always seems to be one person who's at the center of everything happening to the Jewish people in particular, and that sort of means affects the world around those people. What was happening in China during the times of Tanakh? I mean, who knows, right? But certainly around here, what was going on? Well, the Jews were pretty central in what was going on around here through the whole period of the Tanakh. Right? And in every generation, there seems to be someone who's writing a book. It's his book who's describing those years of history. And it's all about him. Whether his name's David HaMelech or his name's Shlomo HaMelech. He wrote other books, not about the history of it. Shmuel HaNavi, the teacher of David HaMelech. And the Rambam lists the 40 generations from Moshe Rabbeinu to Rav Ashi, the compiler of Talmud Bavli. The Rambam lists who taught who, The 40 generations from Moshe Rabbeinu all the way to the compilation of the Gemara, and then from Rav Ashi all the way back up to Moshe Rabbeinu. He goes from the top down and from the bottom up. In his introduction to the Mishnah Torah, Yad HaChazaka, something that you should definitely all learn. It goes through 40 generations. Who was teaching whom? So it's just out there. Okay, come. Let's go a little further so we can finish with words of the Rebbe. Hine, zoisais aveda b'mishkan hamikdash b'avedas habirurim debechinas iskafia, subduing a mevi umayla that brings and elevates lebechinas ishafcha to the level of transforming chashucha, darkness, lenahara, to light. It starts with iskafia and ends up with ishafcha. You can't do ishafcha. You can't transform and external reality with internal reality. You can't transform internal reality without first going through the hard work of iskafia. Iskafia is the discipline of it all, right? And that will bring about the transformation. But without the discipline, there's no transformation. You can't stop smoking cigarettes. You can't become a non-cigarette smoker unless you do the hard work of just stopping smoking cigarettes, right? There's no way. Right? Can't do it. We'd like to get straight to Ishafcha, get rid of the Yetzer Hara for things that we'd rather not have a Yetzer Hara for. Okay, there's only one way to get rid of that Yetzer Hara. Stop doing it. Stop thinking about it. Stop talking about it. And over time, that might stop being part of your subconscious reality also. You'll no longer have a desire for it because it's not part of your life. But you can't do it the easy way, right? The subconscious desire will just disappear. Most subconscious desires don't just disappear. They just change a little based on age. V'lochein achas avedos, one of the services shaya b'mikdash, hu inyan avedos hakarbonos, is karbonos, sacrifices. Shu avoida ruchnis shebenefesh. In addition to the physicality of it, and it's an incredibly physical thing, there's also the spiritual aspect of it in the soul, and that's what the Rebbe is going to explain. And even in the Basi L'Gani, where the physical aspect of the korban was so obvious, and that, that means, a lot of blood and burning and really very physical stuff going on. Even there was an expression of the spiritual side of it. All the more so now when we don't have the physical side, so we basically focus on the spiritual side of it. And what was that even then? Right, the involvement of the Kohanim and the Levim in their service, meaning there were people, Jews, who were responsible. Their service of God was expressed through, meaning their spiritual service of God was expressed through these very physical actions. And in addition to that, what? V'shiram v'zimram, there was also song, music. Be'ez havasa korban, at the time of bringing the korbanos, the Levim would be singing negunim, shezeu aveda ruchnis, which is obviously a spiritual aveda. In other words, even while the most physical things were happening, very spiritual things were also happening. So nigun is a very, very powerful spiritual reality. It's called kulmus hanefesh, the quill of the soul. When the soul wants to say something, it sings a nigun. It's like giving the Eibster a hug. Sometimes you tell a person with words how much you care about them. It's very important. Sometimes words don't suffice, so you give a hug. Because words aren't enough. When a person is in Eretz Yisrael for a while and they go home and they see their family and they see their mother, their father for the first time, I don't think they greet them at the airport and they say, stop, and they take out a piece of paper and they say, I wrote you a poem, and they read the poem, dear mother and father, oh, how I missed thee. You are my light. Though and you read a poem, they'll put you back on the next plane, so they go back there and get normal, or stay away from there because they made you abnormal, right? What do? You give them a hug, right? Just give a hug, right? Usually longer to mom than dad. That's just the nature of mums also, right? Okay. That's why in the Torah, when it talks about fear, kavedes avicha vesimecha, honor your father and your mother. The father is put first. Why? Because naturally you're going to give more honor to your mother. Fear your mother and your father. When it comes to the notion of fear, you're probably going to fear your father more than your mother, so the mother goes first in the Torah. Okay. When mother says, if you do that once more, you're going upstairs. So the kids all know that that doesn't mean anything. Right? And they're going to do it another 3 times, and she's going to say, do that once more, you're going upstairs to your room, and that'll happen 3 or 4 more times. And then the father walks in, and he says, do that once more, you're going to your room. And the kid does it once more, he actually ends up in his room. Right? Then the mother wonders why they listen to the father. It's one of the reasons, because he actually means it. She just doesn't want to send the kid to the room. She doesn't want to do that. But sometimes you have to. Okay. So that's the nigun. Let's go one more line. Just get to the top of the next page. The inyan of Vedas Korban Bavedas Adam B'Nefesh Adam who? We're going to see a very important pasuk. This is the first. It's not the first pasuk in Vayikra, but it's the first pasuk after the introductions of Vayikra, right? Vayikra el Moshe, V'yadaber elav. God called to Moshe and he spoke to him. And what's the first thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu in Sefer Vayikra? And Sefer Vayikra is the Leviticus, 3rd book. It's a very important book. What starts happening in Sefer Vayikra? Bereshis, history of the world, right? So now at the end of Bereshis, there's this thing called Am Yisrael, right? Yaakov Avinu and all his kids, right? Shmeis, Mitzrayim, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah, building the Mishkan in the desert. Okay, that's Shmeis. Therefore what? We're ready. We're ready to start serving God. Shmeis doesn't talk a lot about service of God. There's a lot of halachas in Mishpatim, but those, interesting enough, those halachas are mostly not service of God. I mean, it's all service of God, but they're not, what we might call ritual behavior. It's just, laws of making society work. Where do the laws of our actual service begin? What we do in the context of our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu as overt expressions of service. Vayikra. Korbanos, mitzvahs, starts in Vayikra. So what's the first thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us when he's going to start telling us how to serve him? This line. That's when it starts. The service of God per se starts in Vayikra. Everything else is setting up the table, and then Vayikra is, okay, now, this is what I want you to do. And what's the first line? Adam ki yakriv mikem. A person... I'll just translate it literally, even though we're going to see it has to mean something else. Adam ki yakri mikem, a person who sacrifices from amongst you, korban lavaya, a korban to Hashem, mina behema, should be from domesticated animals, right? Even though there are non-domesticated animals which are kosher, deer, etc., but we don't bring them as korbanos, right? There are birds that are kosher that we don't bring as korbanos, chickens and turkeys. I mean, that's most of that. If we eat a bird, we eat a chicken, right? That's what we eat, but there's no chickens on the altar. Doves and pigeons. Okay, those are the birds that are brought on the altar. Mina behema, domesticated animals. Mina bakar, cattle. The next word is mina tzoin, sheep, which includes goats, right? Cows, bulls, goats, and sheep. Those are korbanos. And then at the end of the passage, takrivu es korbanchem, you'll sacrifice your korban. So now the Rebbe is just about to ask a question. We'll read the first 3 words, so we'll get to the 5 words to get to the other side of the page, and then we'll stop. The lechur, at first glance, yuksha, this is difficult. The im haisa kavanasur bezeh, if this was coming only to tell me the laws of korbanos, it would simply say a person who sacrifices a korban does this. Why does it say mikem? And the word mikem is in the wrong place grammatically. It should say Adam mikem, a person from amongst you who sacrifices a korban. If it says a person who sacrifices a korban from amongst you, what does that sound like? From where are we getting these sacrifices? From amongst us, meaning we're sacrificing ourselves. Well, that's not happening. Oh, well, that is happening actually in Pneumius, in spirituality. That is what's happening. So the verse actually says that, even though the simple pshat in the verse is a person from amongst you who sacrifices a korban, these are the laws of the korbanos. Right? But that word mikem is, we'll write it on the board tomorrow. That word mikem is in the wrong place. It's simple pshat. Right? Now that's always the case, therefore it teaches me something deeper by virtue of the fact that there's a question to be asked in the pasuk. And so that's the question the Rebbe is going to ask, and he's going to explain to us what's the panemius of bringing korbanos. What are you and I learning about service of God from that pasuk? And we're basically learning everything about service of God from that pasuk. Okay, we'll see that tomorrow.
Thank you.